Recently, I was asked by Pizzolo Trinity, GameMasters, quick question for you. As a seasoned DM, how would you theoretically take a weapon idea from a game or movie and transfer it into a D&D 5e scale? I've been trying to figure out how to add something similar to Eleonora's Poleblade from Elden Ring to a game, but I'm struggling. Santa Claus in training here, and converting items or weapons from movies and other games to D&D is actually quite easy, but it does require some good knowledge of what all is out there for Dungeons & Dragons that we can use to reference. Now, I like to stick with the official D&D books when I do conversions, mainly because I can easily reference or tweak something that everyone should have reasonable access to. The first thing I'd do is take a look at Eleonora's Poleblade itself and see what it physically looks like. It's a double-bladed sword. From there, I'd look at what it can do. It has a unique skill called Blood Dance that allows you to leap at a foe and perform a flurry of attacks. Then you can perform an evasive maneuver. But we also know that it can cause blood loss buildup, in Elden Ring anyways. Then I want to take a look at how the weapon itself performs, the attack animation as it appears in the game itself. This is simply going to tell me some additional movement mechanics that I'll want to match up and emulate when we convert it over to Dungeons & Dragons. Real fast, I'd love to ask that if you're enjoying this video, to please give it a thumbs up. It helps with that almighty YouTube algorithm, and it helps me to get it out to more eyes, and I thank you kindly for that. Next, I'd strip away the flavor of the weapon, which leaves us with a double-bladed pole sword that will cause deep wounds and will grant you the ability to perform a flurry attack and an evasive maneuver. We know that the weapon won't have reach because, well, you're holding it in the middle, but I would say that it has finesse and would also have versatile property and perhaps special. Those weapon properties can be found in the Player's Handbook on page 147. For base damage, we reference back to Eleonora's Poleblade, and it states that it has 4 damage type, standard, and pierce. Though with a blade, I'd argue that it would more likely be slashing, but to stay true to how it functions in Elden Ring, and since Elden Ring says piercing, we're going to go and use that short sword's base damage of 1d6 piercing as shown in the Player's Handbook on page 149. However, it is a double blade, but both ends won't be poking your target at the same time, so we'll leave it at 1d6 for now. Next, we want to start adding in the Elden Ring specials. Leap at a foe. Now, the first thing that comes to mind to me is the Harengon special ability called Rabbit Hop. You can find this in the Wild Beyond the Witchlight book on page 13 and use a variation of that as a special ability of the weapon. Then we need to determine a good way to add the flurry of tornado-like attacks in. The monk has flurry of blows listed in the Player's Handbook on page 78, but that doesn't really fit well. And the ranger has whirlwind attack found in the Player's Handbook on page 93, but that doesn't fit that well either. What if we look under the Warlock Eldritch Invocation list in the Player's Handbook on page 111? There is Thirsty Blade that allows us to attack twice with our weapon. Also, if we look up a few slots, we see Otherworldly Leap. Now we might could use that instead of Rabbit Hop. Next, we need to be able to get out of melee after we attack. Both dodge and disengage on page 92 could work, but I'd like something with a little more flair. Oh, go to page 80 of the Player's Handbook, Monk's Shadow. That would certainly get us out of combat. The last step would be to add all of that together. Toss in a little bit more flavor, and you've pretty much recreated Eleonora's Poleblade in D&D. You might perhaps make it a weapon that needs to be attuned, and to address the pluses that you can give it in Elden Ring with the various smithing stones, Dungeons & Dragons already has that built in by simply adding pluses to the weapon. Perhaps as the player grows in levels, the weapon will gain those pluses, or maybe through questing, whatever the DM wants to decide there. I think, too, that this would need to be a magical weapon if it's going to allow you to shadow step and leap into battle. Because remember, that's going to be a mechanic of the weapon itself, not a mechanic of your character. But overall, that's how I would go about converting a weapon or item from a different game or even a movie into Dungeons & Dragons. Now, keep in mind, this is not the only way to do it. I'm sure you could use other abilities. Maybe even charging the weapon with spells could give you the same performance type as what we found in Elden Ring. And I think that that's one of the biggest appeals to Dungeons & Dragons. Whatever you can think of, there is a way to make it happen. Speaking of thinking of creative ways to do something in Dungeons & Dragons, check out this video where we take your basic 4-sided die, well, 2 of them actually, and create an adventure for Dungeons & Dragons. Tell me what you think about our recreation of Eleonora's Poleblade. How would you go about creating one in D&D? Let me know in the comments below, and until next our paths cross, may you not die in Elden Ring.